Welcome to Smashed Avo Property. Today I'm speaking with Ronald Gatbonton. He's a 34-year-old property investor who has built a portfolio of 3 properties since he was 30. Ronald moved to Australia from the Philippines back in 2013, and he talks to us about how he was able to kick off his wealth creation journey.
Adjusting my life here in Australia, I learned more and realized that there are other ways of actually saving, earning. Property investment is actually a good effective way in wealth creation by building a good solid asset base.
As always, seek your own professional financial, legal and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. So without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Ronald. Ronald Gatbonton, welcome to Smashed Avo Property.
Hey Jordan, thank you for having me in your podcast. It's nice to be here.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been passed on your contact as a bit of an interesting story to delve into, so I'm excited to see what you're at and what you're up to and everything like that. But to get us started, why don't you talk to us about what sort of inspired you to get into property investing and how old were you when you started?
Yeah, so I'm a bit older when I started. I actually started when I was 30 back in 2015. So I've migrated to Australia in 2013. I'm actually care field. I'm a registered nurse for the last 14 years. I've moved to Australia last 2013. And yeah, what inspired me to enter the property market is basically what every migrant to Australia will probably be aspiring to achieve, have a place called home. So in 2015, after saving for 2 years and having our permanent residency granted, we went to our banker, one of the big fours, and submitted our papers to see how much can afford or what will be our borrowing capacity back then. Fortunately, in 2015, the Sydney market has been on a rise. And we preferred to actually live and aiming to purchase in a beautiful suburb, Sutherland Shire, but the prices were out of our league. So what we decided is postpone our plan to purchase back then, and then that's when borderless investing became an idea for me. I've kind of started to search online, joined online forums. Back in 2015, I think it was Summersoft and Property Chat. Met a lot of good guys there, sharing their experiences, inspirational, and met some people that up to now I'm still in contact with, bouncing ideas. And now Facebook's also a good avenue to learn and to exchange ideas. So that became also a turning point for me to expand or increase my insight with regards to property investment. Then I also started to have this appetite in podcast listening, themes such as Smashed Avo Property and other similar podcasts are just on my playlist. Like I sometimes intentionally do long drives just to binge watch, listen a whole season of podcasts, because that's one thing that you can listen and just drive, no other distraction. So for me, that's kind of my zen. Or sometimes I'll just go for a driving range, play a bit of golf, and that's my me time. What else? A lot of property books. Actually, Robert Kiyosaki was probably one of the first books that I've learned or I have read. I actually hated reading aside from university books back then. But since this, what do you call that one? Burning fire started, property finance, real estate, personal finance, personal development, it just became a slippery slope. For me now, I've probably collected a good, decent amount of book in my bookshelf. So that's just my collection.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And I think there's an abundance of resources there that have kind of inspired you to get into property investing. And I think, part of the reason I wanted to get you on today was, your story of being a migrant. And, this podcast is mostly directed at sort of that younger generation. And sometimes that can also be misinterpreted to first home buyers as well. So I think your story in particular is pretty inspirational in terms of, you've migrated into Australia and you've had to, as you said, start from the bottom and work your way up and build into that property space. But so I mean, how old are you now? And sort of, was property talked about back home? I mean, where are you from originally? And what sort of the conversation around property was it there, or was it peculiar thing when you came to Australia?
I would say, well, originally I'm from the Philippines. I was born and raised. Then I have migrated to Australia in 2013. When I was growing up, property investment was not kind of thing. But Philippines being what you call it, highly influenced by American television shows, I can see those flippers, what do you call that one? The buy Reno kind of TV show, reality TV shows. But it's just something that doesn't really click on me during those times. So my passion, my interest with property investment in real estate has just started after I secure my first property, or just before I secure my first property. Then that's it. It just went further, and up to now, I still want to learn more. I want to engage with other people that have more experiences than me. It's just a lot of opportunities to grow, actually, and also to meet people with different walks of life. Like most of the people that I've encountered with, they're probably coming in the banking world and in the trades. And me, as a healthcare professional, that's a random curveball being in this industry. But for me, it's a totally kind of wild card, because at least it's a breath of fresh air. I don't always engage with non-health professional. So for me, talking with a carpenter, talking to a builder is a good idea, rather than just talking to someone that's always with the same world as where I belong or move around.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, you talked about a first property there. Why don't you give us a bit more detail in the first property? You said diversification was a strategy that you were considering. Is that an avenue that you did go down? And what does that sort of first purchase look like?
Yeah, so my first purchase was in 2015. So after approaching our banker, and we've learned that we can't, our borrowing capacity for Sydney market was not going to be great. Then we've directed our search to Queensland. We found the property in North Lakes, Queensland, just north of Brisbane. We've secured the property 90% LVR. It was a 400,000 purchase, 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom, two car space garage, and yeah, that's when it all started.
Very nice. And have you sort of had it? What do you think it would be worth in today's money?
Um, at the moment, from last time I've checked, I think it's worth 550 now. It's been a slow capital growth, but slow and steady is the key for me.
Yeah, that's good. As long as it's going up in value, right?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's a marathon. It's not a race, so it works for me.
Yeah, perfect. And so, what sort of a deposit? You said you used a 90% LVR there. So, I mean, how much was the deposit in total for that one? And then, was that money saved whilst you first moved to Australia, or was it sort of brought across from you from the Philippines?
No, that's savings. Since we've started in Australia, before, all I know, my only strategy was actually work hard and save hard. So we just saved. Then when we found this property, then we just put a 10% deposit plus the stamp duties and extra purchasing cost. Then that's it.
Yeah, that's not too bad. And talk to us a little bit about, your history with money. I mean, was it sort of talked about in your household back home? Were you always distilled to save as much as you could when you were growing up? I mean, what does that sort of backstory look like?
Well, back home, yeah, it's kind of like just work hard and save hard. I have very minimal memories of being taught on how to do investments. My parents are also business people, but because they've been busy while we were growing up, I didn't had enough time to ask them about how I can grow my money. They did give us a good educational support, and they did mentored or taught us to work hard and save hard. But yeah, that's one thing that I've learned and I've possessed up to this day. And growing up, adjusting my life here in Australia, I learned more and realized that there are other ways of actually saving, earning. Property investment is actually a good, effective way in wealth creation by building a good, solid asset base. And there's also other means of diversifying your wealth. So that's basically my overall picture with regards to money management.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's good. It sounds like you've had some, some solid foundation there. So, I mean, talk to us about getting started. What was the hardest part about getting started? Was it difficult to get finance over here in Australia, being a migrant? I mean, what sort of hoops and bounds did you have to go through to get your first one?
Because when we started, we were a double income household, me and my wife. The hardest part was actually understanding the terms. I mean, I am not familiar with the banking terms, the lending terms. So when they drop this word to me, what is that? So I have to Google it first. I have limited people to ask by that time during that period, so I didn't have much insight until I started to search, do my own exploration on what everything is. Finance was way easier in 2015 compared at this moment. Like what my broker said, every time we go for finance, it's like going inside through eye of a needle. But yeah, I guess the hardest part is up to this day is finding a balance between managing your money well or being not able to save properly.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a hard balance to find, and sort of trapping that surplus and putting away some additional funds and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, you alluded to having a mortgage broker there and potentially having some additional investments. How's your portfolio looking for these days, and how many do you have in there and all that sort of stuff?
I am holding three properties in my portfolio. So last December 2019, we've settled in one purchase that we've acquired in Campbelltown, New South Wales. So that was a counter-cycle approach in the market. So that was purchased. It's a 560 square meter block at 475,000. So we've managed to extract equity with my other property and use that one plus our own savings to secure that property on a 90% LVR.
Yeah, nice. That's pretty good. And you said you had a second one there as well. What was that purchase?
Yeah, that second one was purchased in 2017. We bought that one in Geelong, Victoria, back when the market in Geelong was just starting to rise. Actually, at present, I would say that will be my best performing property. As I remember, from 355, it was appraised to 450,000 in just over 1 year or 12 months of holding it. So we managed to able to get our equity there and use that one for our next purchase, which was in Campbelltown.
Yeah, that's phenomenal growth. That's pretty incredible. And I think if you look at the graphs at that point in time for Geelong, it's sort of you can see the whole region sort of growing, and it's being considered a sort of a next region for Melbourne for property investors to get in, and people are starting to move there. So it's probably a good time in the market to buy. So it sounds like you're very well diversified. I mean, you've got one in Queensland, one in Melbourne, and one in Sydney, which are the bigger three markets in the country. And sort of looking forward, are you going to continue down that strategy? I mean, what is your goal for property investing into the future?
At the moment, because markets are kind of a bit on a fearful climate, so I'll just keep on observing and just get ready for whatever that may come in our economy. But I am probably going to save and consider going for our PPOR soon, as I have one child now and another one coming this year. So I think it's time for us to have our own nest now. But by saying that, we don't know. Rent vesting is actually working well for us. We love where we actually live right now. And yeah, so we don't know. We're always flexible and open, but at the same time, we do have our end in mind.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting time in the economy, and I think for most of my listeners, they're generally the younger demographic, and so maybe they haven't thought about things like kids and the next phase of life and marriage and all that sort of stuff. So, from your point of view, have you would you still reinforce the investments that you've made so far, or would you have preferred to get a principal place of residence earlier and sort of had that stability moving forward, or as you say, you're quite comfortable with your investing?
It's just hard to say, but if I will have the chance to purchase again, it might be a principle of place of residence, but depends on the opportunity that might present. If there will be a card dealt with me that is actually attractive and numbers will be right for me, then I might consider getting another property, maybe a cash flow strategy or capital growth. It really depends. But at the moment, what we are aiming for is principal place of residence.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Well, that's a good one to get the big rock in the jar, as they say. So, for buying that property, I mean, how would you assess the investment potential of a property?
Probably check the numbers, rental yields, check the suburb using data available online. See if the suburb is heavily towards owner occupies or investment owners. What are the economical drivers that are present in this suburb? Are there any amenities? Me as a migrant, I would always put myself in my tenant's shoes. Like, oh, will I consider working here? Will I consider sending my kids here? Will I consider finding a job here? Those kind of stuff. And also, I always keep an eye on the available information online. Heron White Todd's property clock, domain and real estates, market sales, and percentage clearances. They're all valuable tools that are available as part of due diligence.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big one, alluding to, what your tenants would have as investors. It's an odd thing to consider, what an owner occupier might want to live in. But essentially that's what makes a good investment is an owner occupied dwelling. You want to have good, secure, safe tenants in there for the long run. You don't want to have, rental gaps or, long vacancies and all that sort of stuff. So figuring out what someone would want as an owner occupier is a pretty good way to get in there and assess the potential of it being an investment. But do you think that's kind of been your most successful property strategy, or is there something in particular that you've used when considering your investment properties?
Yes. Then one thing that I always actually kind of consider when choosing is that if I will live there, will I survive? Will I find a job? Will my kids be happy going and living in this community? That's also one thing that I always consider. Like I said, I work as a registered nurse, so I can always try to move around. Funny thing, you've mentioned that my diversification is on the three big states, which is like, those three big states are actually potential for me to move interstate and find an employment. So if that property that I'm going to purchase is so good that, I don't mind living there, then just becomes my owner occupied. But it depends. Like for example, every time we check a property, we just see what it feels like. We try to feel the local vibe of the community. Then is this for us? Is this not? Oh, otherwise it will just be part of our portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. And on that diversification piece, is that how you're sort of managing your risks a little bit? And what do you think your sort of exit strategy looks like?
Yes, for risk management, diversification was one of my main factors considered. Three-state, and I've chosen capital growth as my strategy rather than cash flow. With risk management, what I have learned through the process is having an emergency fund, get the right insurances, and be involved and get the right people in my team: property managers, mortgage brokers, accountants, and that's it.
Yeah,
for my exit strategy. Sorry, I am looking at probably a long-term hold, as long as I can, 10 years above, and basically with the current rates right now, I am considering probably restructure my finance and probably debt reduction, since we're getting good amounts, good attractive interest rates.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good time to sort of start knocking down that debt. But and speaking of restructuring your finance and all that sort of stuff, I mean, how is your current portfolio looking? Like, what's the total value? What sort of an LVR are you currently sitting at, and what do you aim to get your debt down to?
I think I am sitting at 75% LVR for the whole portfolio, and my total will be sitting around 1.5 mil.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty comfortable safety net there. And then, as you say, if you continue to pay that down as much as possible, it's not a bad position to be in. But Over your journey, I mean, it sounds like you've made some pretty good investments there. It sounds like you've gone for your capital growth approach over cash flow, and you've really known what your strategy has been from day dot. But do you think you've made any mistakes during your investment journey? And if so, what are those lessons, and what would you pass on to other people?
Probably the mistakes or the regrets that I will always be thinking about is I didn't start early. But by saying that everyone probably had those younger years that you are clueless or you just been reckless. I always say if I am 2 years younger right now, my portfolio will probably be different. But in hindsight, I actually don't know if I am wiser 2 years younger. So what I always put in my mind is that even if I've started late, then at least I've started. Day one is always better than one day. So yeah, it's not too late to start.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's great advice, especially for the demographic that sort of listen to this podcast. As some of my other guests have sort of started when they were 18, and I've got some listeners that'd be sort of in their late 20s, early 30s, and be freaking out because they feel like they haven't got in there. But I think your story is part of the reason that it's good to get people like yourself on here, is just to understand that no matter what background you're from or how late you started, there's always time to get in. And as you say, it's never too late, really. So, I mean, you sort of alluded to some resources there in podcasts and books and online platforms, but what do you think has probably been the most the best resource that you've kind of used along your journey?
The best resource is surrounding yourself with like-minded people. Like, learning through osmosis is so valuable. Being with the right people along your journey is way better because what you get through them is gold value rather than digesting what you learn from a book or from an online platform, because you get real-time experiences, anecdotal experiences. But of course, be mindful that every person's experience is different, circumstances from yours. So that's just one thing to consider.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said before as well, building that team around you and just having, that wealth of mentors and a knowledge base that you surround yourself with, that you can sort of bounce ideas off and have them as your sounding board and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, as you say, there's only so much you can learn from a book and from a podcast. It's all well and good to hear and read about it, but at the end of the day, unless you actually and you're running your numbers on your own property and sort of seeing how all the ins and outs kind of work and physically doing it yourself, you're not learning as much as you possibly can there. But yeah, I think that's a great one. So, I mean, you sound like a pretty motivated individual. You've come across to Australia and really changed your life around, it sounds like, or set yourself up for the rest of your life, more like it. But I mean, what motivates you to do all of this? What sort of gets you up in the morning?
Oh yeah. What motivates me? It's something that I've learned actually when I was starting off reading Think and Grow Rich book, old book, but golden value. It's I usually start my day by reminding myself to be a better version of myself. So every day is an opportunity for me to learn, to appreciate what God has given me. So yeah, every day is a blessing. And yeah, starting off, it's not too late because I've just started.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and that's the best goal you can really have, is just to be better than yourself yesterday. You know what I mean? You can only improve on who you are and who you're becoming in the future, and not comparing yourself to someone else out there that has had a completely different lifestyle. So, and just in wrapping up, what sort of final advice would you give to the younger generation to get started?
Yeah, so for people with the same situation as me, and or for anyone that is thinking of or interested to enter into the property market and are afraid, remember, it's never too late to start. Just surround yourself with like-minded people that you can talk to or advise you and walk with you through this journey. It's actually a very good journey to pursue. It's rewarding, and it's a very good way to leave a better legacy to your family, to your children.
Mate, that is perfect advice. So I really appreciate you and your time today and coming on. And I just wanted to say massive thanks again. So thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for having me.
I loved Ronald's story, and as he puts it, day one is always better than one day. And it really shows us that no matter where you come from or how old you are when you start, you can still build a significant portfolio in a short amount of time, if you choose your assets wisely. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have one or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey. Learn from the mistakes that we have made and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing your story, you can go to jordandeyong.com/podcasts, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. Also, if you want to see what else I'm up to, you can head over to my YouTube channel to see the latest. Just type Jordan De Jong into YouTube and I should pop up somewhere. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.